If you've been in the market for an affordable sports car in the last 10 or so years, you know exactly what this is. This is the Subaru BRZ, and now for 2024, Subaru's got a special edition of this second generation BRZ. This is the 2024 Subaru BRZ TS. Welcome to Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and I want to talk all about what they did for the 2024 BRZ TS, and then we'll see if it makes any difference on some good back roads. So TS stands for Tuned by STI, and that might make you think that they put a turbo on this car, but they didn't. They didn't do it with the first one either, and in this case, this second generation car has more power and torque over the first gen. I don't think it needs any more. Some people will tell you it does. I don't agree with them. This makes 228 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque from a 2.4 liter Boxer 4. It's the same power and torque as every other second gen BRZ and the twin, the Toyota GR86. Now, they pair that exclusively to a 6-speed manual transmission and a limited slip differential on the TS. The limited slip is standard across the board, but if you don't get a TS, you can get an automatic that's from a Lexus IS250, and I find kind of underwhelming. So that is kind of the power and torque situation here. What they did with the TS is all about handling and braking. Two things you may not think needed to be improved too much, but in any case, they did do it. Now, what would you say if I told you there's one company that makes shock absorbers, massagers, and forklifts? That company is Hitachi, and they built the shock absorbers for this car. Subaru contracted with them to build the shocks. They are tuned by STI, they are spec'd by STI, but Hitachi builds them. Now, the front shocks are a dual valve design, and what that means is you've got different valving rates, different damping rates if you're dealing with low speed impact versus high speed impact. So what that means for real world use is that this car is going to behave, these front shocks are going to behave differently when you're driving at low speeds versus when you're dealing with high speeds. That might also impact things at, say, an autocross versus a track day. So something to think about there. Now, the rear shocks, like I said, are also built by Hitachi, but they are a single valve kind of fixed rate setup. The springs on this car are unchanged from a regular BRZ, so the spring rates are going to be the exact same. Same for the sway bars and all the rest of the suspension. Now, the brakes are a Brembo package here, so that means Brembo calipers, rotors, and pads. They are going to be a 4-piston brake caliper up front and a 2-piston caliper at the rear, and then the rotors are, of course, upsized. It's a 12.8-inch rotor at the front, 12.6 at the rear. It's a 1-point-something-inch upsize on both axles. Now, other mechanical stuff you'll notice here, you've got a different wheel and tire versus a base BRZ, but these are going to be effectively the same as what you get on a BRZ Limited. The difference is the wheels here are dark gray instead of silver. The tire is going to be a Michelin Pilot Sport 4 summer tire. Great tire, nice wheel, it's all gonna be a decent setup. And then otherwise with the TS, the rest of it is going to be visuals. So you've got some different badging, you've got unique red badges on the front and rear of the car, you've got some red BRZ logos here in the headlights, and then if you like the color blue, I've got the interior for you because they've got blue accents all over the interior of this BRZ TS. So the seats are gonna be this mix of like a leather and cloth seat surface, and then you've got blue perforations and blue stripes down the center. That is paired to blue stitching throughout the rest of the interior. You will find that on the steering wheel, the shift boot, and the e-brake boot, as well as little bits everywhere else. Now, all of this adds a little bit of cost to a BRZ Limited. This car is based on the BRZ Limited, so you get every option that they will sell you on a BRZ, and it's gonna add another $2,600, give or take, to the BRZ Limited. It comes in right around 35 grand. If you're looking at a base model BRZ, if you step all the way up to the TS, it's about $5,600 of an upcharge from the most basic to the most loaded. So you'll have to consider that when you are deciding which trim you want to buy. So with all that, that's what they've got to make a BRZ TS a TS. Now let's get on some back roads and see if the mechanical performance upgrades here actually make that much of a difference. You hear that shift beep? Working through all 228 horsepower of the BRZ TS. Now, I'm in the camp that these cars don't need more power. I think 228 is plenty. They weigh under 3,000 pounds, and it's enough to give it character, and you have to work for it a little bit, and that's part of the fun of these cars. If you want more power, go buy a Supra or a WRX or whatever else, but these are really just fine as they are, I think. So let's talk about what actually matters with the TS, namely the suspension and the brakes. So suspension-wise, this has those dual valved front dampers, and then the rears are just a single fixed rate setup, but you know, in theory, the whole thing's been tuned. It should be a little bit better than a factory limited or base model BRZ. Now, does it make much of a difference? Well, as we go through these turns, you know, I think it does a nice job, but every BRZ does a nice job through tighter turns, through big sweepers. You know, the cars are just really well set up no matter if you've got a base or a limited or the TS. I think they all feel pretty nice here. So, you know, this is going to be a very nuancy little bit of improvement, and I think most people aren't necessarily going to notice it. You know, the benefits are there, but how much do you care? I think the biggest appeal is if you just want the best one that's got a factory warranty. If you want one that's a little bit sharper with a factory warranty, these shocks are going to feel pretty nice. Now, where I do notice a bit of a difference is in city driving, because they can be, you know, damped for slower speed stuff and then higher speed stuff as well. So with the dual valves, that's where you're going to get, to me, the biggest difference is just in city driving where the roads are really crappy. The roads I'm on now are well paved. They are, you know, easy for a lot of cars to just do well on, because this is what you expect a sports car to be good at. But in the city, when things can normally feel a little bit rougher, the shocks on this car do a nicer job than I think a lot of things would. So that is a nice improvement. Now, talking about the brakes are, of course, upsized both front and rear. You've got the 4-piston calipers on the front, the 2-piston on the rear. And if we go for a hard stop here, I'm just going to roll on the pedal hard. It feels really nice. The initial bite is really good, and then through that pedal travel, I wasn't getting into ABS there, wasn't a hard enough stop for it, but they feel really nice. Now, again, I think every BRZ has pretty good brakes. I've driven several of these on track, but having a little bit more swept area is good, not only for the sake of slowing you down, but also for dissipating heat. That goes a really long way. So if you are tracking the car in particular, maybe you keep the Brembo pads on it, maybe you put some uprated pad compound on it, but either way, you know, you're gonna have more swept area. That helps with getting rid of heat. So if you're doing long track sessions, it's gonna be a little bit better than the smaller brake setup. And then those extra pistons, of course, help with clamping force. It's going to help you stop a little bit better. All of this stuff has been measured by some of the bigger outlets, and they have found, you know, it helps little bits here and there. It's not huge improvements for a lot of people, but it does help out a little bit. So, you know, all of that plus the interior upgrades, you know, it's $2,600 over a limited. So if you're already going to buy a limited and you want this sort of setup, then sure, you know, it's a nice upgrade. If you don't necessarily care about these upgrades, or you're kind of indifferent to them, I think a regular BRZ is also going to be a very good option for you. And then also, of course, if you want to put your own suspension on the car, if you want to do your own thing with brakes, then you're not going to be going for this one in the first place. But then otherwise, you know, with this car, I don't know what else I would want them to do with it. They added eyesight for the first time to the manual cars, and all the TSs are going to be manual. Eyesight is still kind of a fine system to me for driver assistance. I've driven much better, but you know, it's nice to have something here. The one thing that I don't love about eyesight is that in the city it is pretty intrusive as far as telling you that you're going to hit somebody when you're pretty far away. It's just a little anxious. But this is a car where I would be willing to, much like I'm doing today, get out of the city, find some good roads, and just do this until I run out of gas. It's just fun. It's a pleasant car. The limits are low. That is one of the biggest appeals to me, is that, you know, I'm working through second and third gear, maybe a little bit of fourth, and I'm not really going crazy fast. That's the fun of these cars. They're like Miatas, but to me, they're a little bit better because I fit in them. So I love a good Miata, but this to me is just one of the best sports cars of the modern era, of the last, you know, 20 years or so. I think they are just going to stay well reviewed, well liked, and you know, yes, they've had some teething pains as people started tracking them more. A lot of cars do, but as people figure them out, you know, it's just such a pleasant car. You have to really understand what it is and what it's not, though. You know, if you're looking for a lot of luxury, this is not going to be it. It's got heated seats, but other than that, you know, what else do you have going on here? It's a basic car inside, but that's the point. That's how they keep the price down. I mean, this one is fully loaded, being the TS, and it's 35 grand. You can get into it for much cheaper if you really want, and it's just so fabulous. Ooh, let's avoid that. There's been some storms here, and there's bits of trees all over the road. As far as other driving stuff, you know, the driving position's great. The shifter's right where you want it to be. I don't think it needs to be a short throw or anything. I think that the appeal of this car is how the limits are kind of lower, how everything is well put together, but also still, you know, slightly imperfect. That's what we all like. At least I think so. And that is it for this review of the 2024 Subaru BRZ TS. As always, thank you for coming along. Please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe right here on ye olde YouTube. Give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, now X at Out Motorsports. And if you'd like to join your fellow LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, both online and in person, head over to outmotorsports.com. We've got a very active Facebook group, Discord server, and we've got a bunch of events coming up both in person at racetracks and on some great back roads. We'd love to have you for any and all of that. Till next time, stay safe, be well. See you for the next one.